we on? Good. Welcome to the Better Than Not podcast. Sometimes we get it right, sometimes we don't. But when we at least do something, we know it's almost always better than not. Hi there, and welcome to Better Than Not, the podcast that aims to capture shifting perspectives and thought-provoking ideas in conversation, based loosely on my Changing Frame of Reference series, which you can read on the Substack app, and I hope you will, as it might give you some insight into what this podcast is all about. I am your host, Doug Gardam, and today I'm excited to welcome Dr. Lorenzo Smith to the podcast. Lorenzo, how are you?
Doug, I'm doing really well. Yeah, happy to be here, and it's great to see you.
That's cool. So this is going to be kind of a fun conversation to me today. Lorenzo is a doctor, a family physician in the Abbotsford area, and I thought it'd be a great chance to have a bit of a discussion on this whole kind of medical world and what's kind of going on. And Lorenzo is agreed to come on and have a chat about it. And it's a new environment for him, but maybe you can give us a little bit more, Lorenzo, just on your overall world as it exists kind of today.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So you're exactly right. I work as a family physician in Abbotsford. I practice full scope outpatient family medicine. So just like the family doctor you may or may not have, but when you have a sore throat and you need to go to see somebody, or a sore knee, or have your blood pressure managed, that's the kind of family medicine I do, outpatient, not in hospital.
Cool.
But I do wear another hat. I work in addictions medicine as well. So I work in a clinic in Abbotsford, a rapid access clinic, and I have an OAT clinic as well, which is more for long-term patients or clients struggling with opioid use disorder.
Oh, wow. So yeah, that's a lot on your plate. And we'll get into all of that today, I think, because I think it's fascinating how this kind of happens in one's life. And it really is the first kind of thing that I think about is like, did you know early on you wanted to be a doctor? Like, do you remember like when, like, because most of the people that I know that are doctors have like a very early experience, and it's almost all they ever wanted to be. And when you look at what you have to go through, like literally through the regular public and high school, but then going through the years and years of university, college, and so on, that's a lot.
Mm.
And did you have like a sense like early on, like, can you remember like, I want to be a doctor, or did it not come about like that for you at all?
It did. It's hard for me to remember a time when I couldn't see myself heading in that direction.
Like even as a youngster?
Yeah, and I will come out right away and say my dad's a family physician, so it's kind of
Okay.
in the blood, so to speak. Probably early on, there was a little bit of internal rebellion where I thought, I don't want that. That looks too hard. My dad is still practicing as a family doc, and he's a hardworking guy.
Oh
He
yeah.
also comes from that older generation. He is South African trained, and has worked as a doc for several decades now.
Wow.
And he's part of that era of doctors where they did it all. And we're working long hours, working long days and weeks.
Would he have done house calls?
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
And, there was a time where he was delivering babies, working in the emerge, various admin roles, outpatient family medicine. He did the rural life as well. I think there was always this pull, and yet there was this little bit of resistance where I said, I'm not sure I want that. Now, family medicine has shifted. I think it looks very different today than it perhaps used to. But I do recall at a young age having that pull. To give you a little bit more of my story, I loved the sciences and math and so on as far back as I can remember. Even middle school, and probably have a bit of a cliche story whereby I loved sciences, but I also loved people, and I didn't want to sit in a lab all day. So I had a little bit of research exposure in my undergrad, which was at SFU, and I
Okay.
kind of realized it wasn't for me. I
So,
did have several other interests in undergrad. Thought about switching up
oh, really?
career path. Yeah.
In like into something like surgery, or like what
Well,
were the some of the things that you would have thought about at that time, especially with the science background, kind
yeah.
of?
Yeah. So this was, during undergrad at SFU pre-med school. Um, I think the closer I got towards medical school applications and writing my MCAT and so on, as your path narrows, you kind of look around you and you think, shoot, what about this? What about that? Uh, Other paths that I was considering at the time would be very, very different. So not just different fields within medicine, but actually just entirely different careers. I thought, okay, why don't I switch my degree to study English? Why don't I think about videography or seminary, or just drastically different careers that were kind of going through my mind, but never acted on that. I continued my degree in physiology, and went the medical path, which I'm so grateful for now. I really love it.
So how many years did you spend post high school in school? And did you take time off in between? Did you do experience kind of, I'll say, activities of going to like another country to get experience? Like, what other kinds of things did you get involved with? Because by and large, I hear that is the story.
Yes, yeah. I was chatting with a friend about this the other night, and I didn't take much time off. I took summers off often in between years of university, and would kind of come back home perhaps and pick up a summer job or do a little bit of research or something like that. But I didn't take a gap year per se. So I did 5 years of undergrad at
Okay.
SFU, and ran track and field and cross country there at the time. So really, really enjoyed that student athlete life. Wanted to take my time and ride it out. Ended up applying for medical school towards the tail end of that. Was fortunate enough to get in locally to UBC, so had a smooth transition from undergrad to 4 years of med school. After which I did 2 years of family medicine residency, also through UBC. So total post high school years would be 11.
Oh man.
Although the tail end of that is your residency, and it really feels like you're out working at that point.
So when you get to this, because I like you hear residency, like that's the big kind of we're
Right.
just about there, right? And then you hear like it's kind of like a Navy SEAL, like okay, you're here, but now you got to do this. Like, what was residency like for you?
Mm, mm. I'll be honest. I had a great experience in residency. Um, I think that there are harder programs out there than family medicine.
Okay,
Just to say it how it is, I've got some friends in surgical specialties, for example, general surgery or vascular surgery, and those might be the sort of slightly more stereotypical residencies where you're working 80, 90 plus hour weeks,
wow,
hardly leaving the hospital, 5 years long plus fellowships and so on. On the family med side of things, it's no walk in the park, certainly not, but it feels a little bit more manageable, I would say.
okay,
It's 2 years. Having that finish line in sight is so helpful, right? um, it's also, I think, perhaps a little bit more balanced. Now that's program and university dependent, but it might be a bit more balanced because that's kind of also baked into the ethos of family
right,
medicine, I think, a little bit more.
okay,
um, but sir, I have some memories of challenging days, challenging weeks. Right, it's the hours, it's the kind of cognitive challenge of trying to absorb and learn new information. It's the challenging content of dealing with people who are suffering and life and death. It's the challenge of being put into a bit of an expert role when you're not quite ready for that. Right, there's this um, expectation that you sort of step up to the plate and learn on the fly a little bit. There's social isolation. There's all sorts of reasons why residency is challenging. I mean, I remember showing up to my first call shift ever at the hospital, kind of day 2 of residency, absolutely shaking like a leaf,
oh wow,
ready, not ready for whatever was going to be thrown at me. but there's something really beautiful about rising to the occasion and seeing yourself grow in the midst of challenging circumstances, you know?
Yeah, no, for sure. Do you think you're you mentioned SFU doing now that's for those listening, that's Simon Fraser University. Do you think your athletics helped at all in that world
Hmm.
and given you
Yeah,
that like sustenance or endurance to go through that as well?
I do think so. You know, I've been playing competitive sports for my whole life, soccer and taekwondo and track and field and so on. And I think sports and athletics has a unique way of teaching you resiliency,
Yes.
you know, and the beauty of kind of suffering through something. And I don't know of any other, you know, or any better teacher than aerobic
Oh yeah.
sports as well, right?
Yeah.
I do quite a bit of cycling and running still these days, and there's something really character building about it. About yeah, I mean, you're forced to just sort of show up and train even when you don't necessarily feel like it. You're forced to push through a bit of pain. So I think that was probably quite formative. I mean, I've got colleagues who are awesome doctors and have been able to suffer through residency, and they might not come from a competitive
Right.
sports background. We all build our resiliency in different ways, I'm sure. But I know in my story that absolutely has played a part, I think.
Well, I mean, kind of a tangent here, but like I don't know like how you get through things without having that, like whether it's running or exercising, some kind of part physical that's in your, shall we say, activities that you do. Like for me,
Mm.
to me, it's like it saved me for my whole life. Like I just,
Oh,
it's one of those
yeah.
things. Like you left. I played hockey younger when I was in my younger years, but leaving high school, like for some reason or other, it was in my head that like, okay, you're not going to be doing like physical education anymore. You've got to be putting something in your life that keeps you doing that. And
Mm.
I think of like the stress of work, the stress of just general life, and then being able to go out and run 5K. Just like,
Hmm.
oh my goodness, I feel like a whole different person, right?
Hmm. Hmm. Absolutely, it's key. I know it saved me, and you know, I think I used to have that thought: shoot, should I quit running? Is this too much? And even though it was a thing, you know, for many years that made life stressful because we were traveling around, we were NCAA Division
Oh
two
my
as well, so we
goodness.
travel a lot to the States, right? And again, cross country in the fall, track and field in the spring, so we'd be competing and training all year round. There were so many times where I thought, man, this is so stressful, but it was also the very thing that kind of provided me that freedom and outlet and saved me in many ways, right? It brings community, it
Oh yeah.
brings all sorts of stuff.
It'll be,
So
it will, do you think it'll find its way into your, like, as far as how you provide medical, the kind of advice and direction to as a family physician to people as well?
as far as recommending movement and
Yeah.
exercise,
Yeah.
yeah, you know, absolutely. There was a bit of a trend years ago, so a few years ago, towards prescribing medicine. Excuse me, prescribing exercise
Okay.
as medicine. You know, it felt a little bit funny to me to kind of sit there with a prescription pad that said 30 minutes of exercise a day, 5 days a week, right?
Yes.
Um, but uh, but definitely, it's a big part of what I encourage people to do. I think if there is something that's a bit of a panacea, you know, if there is kind of a cure all out there, it might be that. And I don't always frame it as exercise because I think that word can feel sticky for some people. You know, they might not have a good relationship with competitive sports or exercise, but
Yes.
we talk about body movement, you know?
Oh, I think that part, there's something about that word, I think, that does, I guess it's close to exorcism or something to that effect. But it's like those that are, it's a part of their life. It just is. And you talk to other people that don't do that, and it's like not a chance. I'm like, why would I
Yeah.
go out and hurt myself to make
Yeah.
myself work for something that basically I get a glass of water for at the end?
That's right. And a
Interesting.
few muscle cramps.
So, and now I'm twisted between or conflicted here between going down this route where you've also mentioned about addiction world and working that, but also the other side of it is with your father being, for, as you said, decades in the medical world, the changes that have gone on to what you enter. So I'm kind of split, which because I want to cover both of those things because I think they're very fascinating. So I'm going to start with addiction. I think let's go down that. Like, where did like that interest come from? Like, it fits to me directly with being a family physician, but that's a tough world
Mm.
when people are dealing with people they know that are people that are how does that? How did you get kind of interested and involved in that?
Such a fair question. And I've been asked this many times, and I still struggle to give a good answer because I think who knows why we make the decisions we do and how we end up on the
Yes,
paths that we end up on, right? It's so complex.
yes.
Um, but if I think back and try to reflect a little bit on my journey and my story, um, a big goal of mine entering medicine would have been to find a little bit of a niche. I thought I would do a specialty. And then when I decided to do family medicine, I thought, great, I can do family medicine. This is about third year medical school, so your first clinical year. I decided on family med. But I knew I needed a little bit of a niche. And that advice was from my dad and many others in medicine who have advised, hey, general family medicine is great, but you also feel like an idiot a lot of the time. So find an area where you feel like you know what you're doing,
Oh,
right? And that
really?
can be, yeah, yeah. I mean, it's such a vast field, right? There are constantly people walking in where I kind of say, I don't know what's going on here. I need to look into this. I need to make a referral, right? Um, some
That's
people,
beautiful what you just said to me because
hmm,
so often like in the world that I kind of come from and grown up in, it was always like the doctor always knows. And it's like when you as you grow in experience, you just think of the impossibility of and the infinite number of like what could happen to somebody. So acknowledging that, Lorenzo, to me is very cool because it gives you a chance to say like doing his best.
totally, totally. And it's such an interesting topic to me. If we have time, we've got to touch on it. But I'm pretty honest with my patients. I'm pretty honest with my patients about the complexity of medicine. And I know I've had patients tell me, hey, that's the first time I've ever heard somebody say, I don't know. And we're okay with that. I'm early in my career, right? But when I was first starting out, I had a lot of imposter syndrome, like many of
Oh,
us do. And, I felt really uncomfortable saying, I'm not sure, I don't know. And the more I've said that, the more I've thought, I think people just appreciate honesty,
oh,
right?
I
They
do.
get, they
Absolutely.
get it.
I've
Yeah.
written a whole book on this,
Huh.
Lorenzo, because when you go to that point, I just think of how things get so messed up when you don't know and you make something up. I'm coming from the corporate
Yeah.
world,
Hmm.
and I'm thinking like of the PowerPoint world, and somebody comes up and like it's like, and it's there's enormous fear when you're in a boardroom with surrounded by what you hope are your peers, and you stand up and say, "I don't know, but I'll find out." It's
Yeah.
just like it's and many times, I mean, in a societal work, you're almost saying goodbye to your career. Like, what do you mean you
Mm,
don't know? And to me,
mm.
it's so refreshing when you're saying like, "Well, I don't know, but I'm going to do my best to try and figure this out." Right? Like that's and to your point, I think people know anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. People are smart,
Oh
right? They
yes,
can
I
they
know.
can tell. Um, so I think back to the path towards addictions medicine. Um, I knew I wanted a niche. Now, I still say I don't know. Addiction. Okay, but it is nice to have a little bit of a field where I feel like I'm operating a little bit more as somewhat of an expert, so to speak.
Hmm.
Now, to give a couple sort of concrete memories or examples, I mentioned that third year, that clinical
Hmm.
year of medical school. So you go from 2 years of mainly classroom-based learning, I'd say, 90% classroom, maybe 10% clinical. And all of a sudden it's the exact opposite. It's 90% clinical, 10% classroom. It's quite an
That's a big
abrupt
shift.
switch. And yeah, now you've entered your clinical rotations, which is an immensely challenging year. As a bit of an aside, you travel around, you're changing rotations every week, every month, every 6 weeks, depending on the rotation. And you're getting exposure to family medicine, ophthalmology, general surgery, and so on, traveling to different parts of, the province. I think between third and fourth year, I used to know the exact number, but it was upwards of 15 hospitals that I worked at in my medical training, right? So
Wow.
it's really quite a unique time where you're constantly moving and constantly getting, new exposure to different fields, different colleagues, different geographic areas. So one of my rotations in third year early on was in a small town in rural BC, and I was working just with an awesome family doc there who had a methadone clinic as part of his practice,
Oh, wow.
um, which is a form of is one example of a medication
Hmm.
that we use to treat opioid use disorder, which maybe we'll get into a little bit. But I got to see how, say once a week he could have this little niche and work with these wonderful patients who were suffering, who were struggling. I got insight to the opportunity to um, tap into more than just kind of the medicine, so to speak, but into the, more of the psychological and even the spiritual and the social sort of aspects of health and medicine. I just had a little brief window into that, right? But there's this memory, if I can share,
Hmm.
there's this memory that I have of walking back from the hospital area there one afternoon to my accommodation, and as it happened, I was able to actually see the doctor kind of on one side of the street, so to speak, and a patient on the other side of the street within a few minutes of each other, both kind of out in their yard doing yard work. And to see doctor and patient, somebody doing uh, both of them doing yard work, and the doctor kind of with the success in life that they had, and a certain class in society, and then this wonderful other human being there, um, with some struggles. I think that moment, was really powerful for me because it highlighted the humanity of us all, right?
Hmm.
And at the end of the day, we all go home and we just want to do a bit of yard work and have a simple life. I'm not sure what the deeper lesson is there, but it was a powerful moment for me. There's these little moments along the way, right? And our preceptors, our teachers along the way can certainly be so, so impactful. So, um, there's more there, than in fourth year med school. I did a rotation at St. Paul's, really enjoyed it. And then in residency, kind of kept my eyes out for opportunities, and did some addictions work a couple towns over, expressed interest, did a little bit more training, and there we go.
Yeah.
So I don't have a full extra year. I didn't do a fellowship afterwards.
Okay.
So I'm not an addictions doctor per se, but I do have a little bit of a special interest in it.
Well, it's so interesting to me when you mentioned like in the story of seeing like a patient and the doctor, and it's one of the things that I've taken a long time to learn because I spent a lot of my early year in the corporate world and all that kind of thing, and this whole idea that you're where you are because of the decisions you've made, and it's kind of like your fault. And in I'll say the last 10 to 15 years, it's really started to understand like, it's not necessarily your fault. And it's
Mm,
like, yet it seems to be, I think you see it a lot, still see it in the societal kind of climate that you see, whether it be the homeless, whether it be people that are, we call it down in their luck, so to speak, but kind of what you just said in recognizing the humanity of it.
mhm,
And it's
mhm.
it's like, um, well, the example I can think of, Lorenzo, is I don't know whether you've seen Dope Sick or Painkiller.
it's been recommended to me. I've yet to kind of get to it.
So I have, I'll say I've had a closeness with only a vague, basic closeness. I'm not working directly with people by that means, but those two movies, Dope Sick in particular, was seeing a doctor, Michael Keaton. I think it might be his best role, which is kind of weird with all the things that he's done. But he was a doctor that became unexpectedly hooked on OxyContin, and
Mm,
the troubles that went through that you just, it gave a kind of like, again, I know it's like a biopic. It's like it's still an entertainment vehicle, but it gave you a picture of something that, and that's why I was intrigued when you had mentioned about family physician and then doing addictions, is you see just something like, it's like it's out of their control. Like it's one of those things that like it's it's almost unexplicable, like unexplainable.
hmm
I don't know whether that's accurate or not, and why some are able to get through and some just can't do it.
Yeah.
And that's to me, that must be fascinating to go through that.
It's really intriguing. And, I still feel like such an infant, such a baby in my knowledge and my understanding of this whole complicated world.
Oh,
It's one thing to sort of, grasp the medical sort of pharmacologic side of things. Okay, we're going to prescribe these medications. This is how we do it. This is how long you should be on it. And it's another to try and understand the why behind any of this in the
mm,
first place.
mm.
There's a great author, a now retired physician named Gabor Mate.
Oh
I don't know
yes,
if you know the
yes,
name.
yes.
Yeah,
Very. I'm thinking of him as you speak, actually.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So um, I've had, on a purely coincidental basis, I've had the privilege of meeting him and chatting with him, and he's the real deal. He was really generous with his time. I coincidentally met him on a ferry one time,
Oh wow.
and we got chatting. So I've been impacted by his work. For those who don't know, he was a family physician and addiction with a focus in addictions in the downtown east side. I
Mm.
think he had other focuses in his career along the way, but he wrote a book. I actually have it on my shelf somewhere. Here it is. Yeah, in the realm of hungry ghosts.
Oh, okay, okay.
Conveniently, where is that? Conveniently planted over my shoulder. But no, it's that was one of my first sort of. Um, he was, I suppose, through a book. He was my first sort of teacher, perhaps along the way.
Interesting.
He really examines some of the why without claiming to know it all.
Right.
But he points to trauma, right? I mean, he has consistently pointed to trauma as a root cause for many ailments. And perhaps addiction is the most obvious of them. Um, so when we ask the why honestly, and when we see the little minute reasons along the way that have led people to being at drastically different points in life, I think it's super humbling.
Oh,
I think it's really, really humbling because, as you say, Doug, I would just agree. So much of this is out of our control. So much of it is the household we're born into. Even while we're sort of in utero, the
yeah.
environment of our parents, early things that we don't have control over.
Mm.
Now, I don't go so far as to say it's all environment,
Yes,
right? Now,
yes.
of course, it gets
Yep,
complicated, but that feels a little hopeless, doesn't it?
yep,
Right?
yep.
I do think that there's something we can do, right? And I love to explore that line with patients of, acknowledging wounds, acknowledging hurt in my limited capacity that I can do as a doctor, exploring past pain while holding on to hope, right?
Right,
And
right,
while setting a trajectory forward that says, hey, this doesn't need to define all of you.
right,
It's a
right.
tricky balance, isn't it?
Well, to me, as you said that, there's something. The term "something we can do" is sometimes I think back because I was recently going through another discussion around Alistair McGrath, and he was talking about C.S. Lewis and the problem of pain. So this kind
Mm.
of fits into the same kind of category. And they were kind of getting to the point that why is not necessarily the right question. It's how do we deal with this, better deal with. We're going to have it. We can't avoid it. It's here. Suffering, pain is going to be with us in life. To think we can, despite all the books that are out there telling us to be happy, it's part of what our existence is. And rather than trying to figure out how we can fix not to have it, how do we better deal with it? And this
Mm.
is brings me back even to what you mentioned about Gabor was he was one of the first, I think, that I heard. The Myth of Normal, I think, is another of his books.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he was emphasizing, and I'm paraphrasing here for sure, but from a medical perspective, looking at a person only from their physical symptoms and the science associated with it without having the idea that there's an emotional human being there and what they're dealing with is kind of like half well, as a very small portion of what that experience. You mentioned complexity that's there. Like I come from an engineering science world as well. So for years, I thought everything could be answered through science. Like that was my whole perspective. And I'm kind of now reversed a lot because like there's just so much in our experience as a human that we can't explain through science. I'm really glad we have it, by the way, because like fly in planes and we drive around in cars and we go in boats. Like it's really good. We've got that figured out, right? We can pretty much fly anywhere we want to pretty safely.
Yeah.
But when you go through like even you think of when we woke up this morning and up to the point where we're talking now, the stuff that has actually gone on that we just like yesterday we had no idea that that was what was going to happen. And that's
Mm-hmm.
all part of our human experience to me. So that's why I said when you said, but there's something we could do. I think those were your words. To me, that's kind of like I don't know, but I think there's something we could do. And this, to me, that eases the idea versus how disappointed I'll be when we're saying it's going to go away and it doesn't.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like I think that's like certain devastation, right? That you said I was going to get better, but it didn't work.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. There's certainly in addictions medicine, I find myself needing to sort of frequently check my own
oh
expectations,
my
right?
goodness, yes,
Because it's really easy to dream on someone's behalf and say, we're going to get you healthier, right? You're going to get a home, you're going to get a job, maybe you'll have a family, you'll heal all of those broken relationships, maybe you'll heal old wounds, you'll great goals. Let's keep that in mind, right? But we have to perhaps redefine healing and redefine success and work with patients on that, right? What are your goals? Where are you trying to get to?
mm.
What would make you happy? And for some people, it's, um, I really want to get into second stage housing, or I want to, get my child back in my life, or I want to get back to my career as a carpenter, right? We say, great, let's set that. We don't need to try and take people struggling with addiction and turn them into the next prime minister necessarily,
Yes,
right?
yes,
Um, so I constantly have to sort of reframe expectations and goals um, and really celebrate the small sort of
mm.
moments of healing along the way, even if those small moments of healing are a smile,
Yes,
or
yes,
showing up to their appointment, right? Or having a good day, feeling better on one day. And that applies to regular medicine as well,
yep,
right? Because as you rightly say, Doug, this is something that I think a lot of us docs struggle with. Many of our patients are not going to get better,
mm.
right?
Mm.
And that's not a surprise to anyone. We all know that. We've all had our own experiences where we go to the doctor and they kind of say, hey, we don't really know, or this is taking a turn for the worse, and we're at the end of what we can offer, right?
Yes,
So learning to do what we can and and reframe success and healing
yes,
and so on, right? Sometimes I find myself realizing or at least thinking in the moment, I have nothing to offer this person, this patient. Um, and I've been challenged by some friends and colleagues to think, well, you do have something to offer them. You have a little bit of hope, a little bit of
Yep.
time, a bit of presence, right? Those sorts of things go a long way.
And that doesn't have to be a lot, like for a long time. It's just getting you through that next moment, in essence, right? And for
Yeah.
me, so was it? So you mentioned the story of the when you were out as in the rural community, seeing the doctor with the patient, or not with a patient, but in their two positions in life.
Hmm.
Where did did you have a shift in your thinking? Because mine was clearly a shift in my thinking, in the sense that, like, why do we kind of think we're in control? And the where it came from was actually science, because I did, and I've repeated this many times in the podcast, but I had nothing to do with coming into this world. Like, when, where, why I came in 62 versus 1862, all those kind of things. So when I address that, then it's like, okay, so where is it that I suddenly have control? So it's a really complicated, to me, essence to try, and not trying so much to figure it out, but to live with it, and to, as you say, kind of inspire a hope that we can get through this next point and this next part and this next part. And so my shift in seeing, like, um, people that are in different things, like when we're succeeding, whatever success is, it's because I did it. And when something
Mm.
bad happens, that wasn't me. So, and to me, a lot, how do you go about those, um, conundrum doesn't seem to be the right word for it, but like those real, true human experiences from the highs and lows.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's a great question, and I think perhaps something I'll say right off the top is, I mean, my mind is going to St. Paul's as
Okay.
as a medical student immediately, and I did some emerge there and some internal medicine and addictions medicine. St. Paul's is downtown Vancouver, and it serves a really vulnerable population. Um, a lot of people with decades of being unhoused or homeless, in other words, decades of pain and trauma. Um, it serves a pretty unique population, right? And so when I was doing those rotations, um, and intimately encountering people, humans
Yeah.
in front of me, right? That society wants to push away. I think it just bred more empathy. It's that's immediately where my mind goes to those number of weeks and perhaps even few months over my medical training there. Um, just story after story of human in front of you with a story of deep pain and suffering, and a human who just needs some compassion and some empathy.
Yep.
And I think that the staff physicians there that I would have worked with would have been the first ones to kind of teach me that, again, we need to reframe our language of success and failure.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that was also when I was first exposed to concepts of harm reduction as
Oh,
well,
okay.
right?
Okay. Yep.
So yeah, I think in general, probably my mind also goes to just sort of values, and I think my parents were good at instilling values in me, and just fortunate to have parents that realized we're all kind of messed up, and we all need grace, and you do what you can, you
Yes.
you be faithful in what you can be faithful in, you work hard in the areas that you can work hard in. And sure, there's probably a little bit, at least we all feel subjectively, there's a little bit of correlation with work that we put in and effort that we put
Yes.
in and so on. But you know most of life is a gift. I really, really believe that.
It's It's well said. Well said to me. When you start to acknowledge that, um, and I think that will stand you well throughout your career, because it's like it's it's one of those things that you just how else do you sum it up? It's a gift.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
to get a chance to experience this kind of reality that yes, there's tough parts to it, but there's also enormous joys that are associated with it as well, right? That you just
Mhm.
and you would get both of those as a family physician too, right?
Mhm. Mhm. Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
you must see that in your like your addiction work as well. That there is success that somebody gets through this, right?
Yeah. And I think, yeah, perhaps I don't want to undersell the level of success we can achieve with people,
Right.
right? There are people that experience, meaningful change and meaningful healing, and leave addiction behind far in the rearview mirror, and it's remarkable and it's amazing. And it might not be as in the public eye,
Right.
right? Because people kind of get on with their lives, and so again, I'm still early in my career, and I'm building those sort of stories,
Yes. Yeah.
but I do have some patients I can think of, right, whose lives have turned around, and it's beautiful.
That's cool.
um, where does that resiliency come from? Where does that hope come from? Man, that's such an interesting question. But certainly, yeah, there are some successes, and again, within the family medicine world as well, right? We see people cured of cancer. We see
I know.
people
It's amazing.
change their lives and turn around. Um, yeah, it's quite a contrast. This is the cliche family medicine thing, to say, right? You can go from one patient where you're diagnosing cancer to another
Oh,
patient where there's a newborn child, and I think it's the contrast is just only that much bigger for me with a foot in that addictions medicine
I'll
world
bet.
when I'm encountering people with their stories of pain. People. Who have just experienced so much suffering. So yeah, I feel very grateful for that kind of unique window into the lowest of lows, and then people's best moments as well. Um,
Yes.
I really really enjoy um, getting to walk with people. I think maybe that's what I love most about
Yes.
medicine is getting to walk side by side and play a small role in people's lives in that
You
way.
would get a very unique perspective on that for people because, like you said, you don't know, you see them maybe in some of their greatest days, but at the same time, you see them on some of the worst days. Our son's a paramedic, and he will
Mm,
often
wow.
say he gets to see people at their worst. Like that's where, and he said part of the struggle, which will lead to my next question, is we don't get to see the other side
Yeah.
because we're just taking them from where they were to get them the help as quickly as we can, right? And so we're not seeing them in joyful modes or even
Hmm.
seeing them get, call it, repaired or whatever they're needed. um, we don't see that. We just see that worst moment kind of thing. And that kind of brings me to what, like, with all this that you and which is interesting, I think, with your family background as well, is knowing how do you get like re-energized, debriefing, like, because as you're human too. Like,
Yes.
to me, that's one of the most interesting things about the doctor world, is that I think we are realizing that doctors are human too, right? They do incredible things, but are there ways now which would be probably very different from what your father would have had to do? And I kind of think of it even with how we deal with, I call it mental health, right? From coming back from World War II, is suck it up, right? This, like, deal with it. And to realizing like the PTSD that's experienced to the levels that's so variant. As a doctor, do you have ways of being able to, or I'm sure you do, but like, how does that work in your kind of world? In yes, it's the
Yeah.
joys, but there's also this, like you said, you go from 0 to 10 and back to zero again, like within 15 minutes, likely, right?
Yeah. 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 Great question. And I think it's an important topic, and the kind of humanity of physicians themselves is something that I, think we need to remember, as a society, especially when stress is high and the medical
Oh,
system is struggling. Perhaps we'll talk about that.
yes, yes.
But you know, I've had times of burnout, right? I mean, I'm early in my career, but it's this long process to get into medicine, right? We were talking
Yes.
earlier about that journey of years of schooling. I've certainly had times of burnout during that time period. Um, I think I've had to just learn some lessons and learn some strategies, because I really believe that when it comes to recharging and rest, you have to be proactive. You really can't be reactive. Um, Being reactive is like trying to uh, starting your day with an empty cell battery,
Right,
right? And
right.
you're just looking for every outlet, and you're kind of plugging it in whenever you can, and you never make it past 25%,
Yep,
right?
yep,
You're on
yep.
low battery all day. I think we have to be proactive in our, in our own well-being as physicians. And man, I mean, this goes for anyone, paramedics,
Yep.
right? Anybody in allied health. Um, so, years ago when I was a student, I hope I can speak freely about, some spiritual stuff
Hmm.
perhaps. But years ago, as a student, I was introduced to the idea of taking a Sabbath, which is, I'm a Christian. It's
Yep.
not something I grew up with, but this topic was introduced to me as a means to kind of intentionally recharge and rest.
Yep.
Pretty overtly a spiritual thing, but something that I think can be beneficial for anyone. So for me, what does it look like? Well, it's just a 24-hour chunk at least on the weekend when I try not to work. Try not to check emails. Try not to um, look things up. Open up the patient chart, right? Try to just detach from that world a little bit and do things that bring you joy and help recharge you and bring delight. Maybe it's grabbing a bite to eat with friends, or I love to exercise, right? I'll go on a trail run, or I'll hop on my road bike, see my nephew and nieces. So, I've been practicing that rhythm kind of on and off, sometimes half-heartedly, sometimes really strictly, for probably about 8 years now.
Oh,
And
wow. Okay.
yeah, it's kind of served me really well.
So you do
And
have to practice it.
oh man, you have to practice it, right? Even years into it, I think I find myself having to have a bit of discipline with it, right? Because I do enjoy working, and it's so easy to open up that email or
Oh, yes.
look something up, right?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, A, we're also scattered on our technology and phones,
Yep.
but B, if you're lucky enough to be in a field that you actually love, sometimes it doesn't feel like a burden, right? But discipline and practice, I think, is key in this. Again, that idea of being proactive with rest, right? Um, so that would be one thing I point to as kind of a bit of a rhythm. I think it's really hard to be a healthy human without living in community. I want to say that as well.
And
You know,
I think a lot of that's been demonstrated in the last 4 years, right? Like
yeah,
it's
hasn't it?
for me, that is one of the biggest things I think that I've recognized, because I knew for years that I had to have people around. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, when I talk about my corporate experience, you always had people around. You didn't
Mm,
necessarily want people around, but you had people around. But without them at all, you noticed a real vacuum. And so as my life shifted to more being around writing and creating, being alone, I realized, and even when we moved out here, like that you had to go out and you had to be, I'll say, intentional about it.
yeah.
Because what I also found is the phone's not ringing. like like if I wait for the phone to ring for somebody to come, I could be waiting a long time. And I don't think that's a unique, I used to think it was a unique experience. I don't think it's unique anymore in talking with, especially with men, more and more, is
Hmm.
their phone doesn't ring. So, like, go out and have a coffee, right? You have to be very intentional with it. So, to me, that community part became just enormous. Well, I mean,
Yeah,
community
yeah,
is how we even met.
absolutely.
And I think I don't think I paid as much attention to it um, because it was more of a propensity for me than something that like I don't aspire to being alone all the time as an example, right? So
Yeah,
I
yeah.
get what you mean when you say community. It gets to have this kind of name, quote, community, but it's
Mm,
really just being with other human beings.
exactly. And I think, man, you've touched on some great stuff there. And I think um, something else I'll highlight there would be keep, thinking about the world of physicians and let's say healthcare practitioners in general. Something else that is unique about our journey is that we go through so much training where you have a cohort around you,
Mm,
right? And
okay.
you've got colleagues and students, and you're kind of in the trenches, so to speak, together,
Right.
um, forming these deep friendships, right? And then maybe that transition to from undergrad to med school, right? You form a bit of a new cohort and new friends, and then you leave medical school and you get to residency, and now you have maybe a new a group around you again, and then you graduate, and now you're a grown up doctor, right? And you've lost that kind of
Ah,
you've lost that built-in uh, safety net and social support. Uh, Specifically, you've lost sort of that camaraderie
yep.
of say, co-med students or co-residents, where you get to go to the resident lounge and share all your frustrating stories from the day, right?
Yep.
And life gets busy. So the life of a doc or a nurse or a paramedic can also be quite lonely if we're not careful, right?
Interesting.
So,
Interesting.
I think it's really important for myself when I think about being a healthy person and maintaining balance. I have to have friends outside of medicine and I have to have friends within medicine. And I'm really fortunate to have amazing, amazing colleagues, right? And that's gone a long way to kind of preserving my hope and
Yep.
preserving my energy and so on. Um, yeah, there's lots more I could say, I'm sure, about how I try to stay balanced, but those would be a few
It's an
things.
interesting comment you made because I had a doctor on from Britain who was dealing with kind of trauma from exhibitions, like
Hmm.
expeditions, like people that go on like long journeys.
Hmm.
And one of the things that I thought was so interesting was like we tend to think of school as the subject oriented thing. What's the curriculum of school? And yeah, you're going to see other people's there, but that's just like the side part. And I started to think her name was Dr. Sophie Redlin, and she was from the UK, and that's where her study was actually going, was dealing with mental health for people on expeditions. Because I,
Hmm.
and not to get too far off the track, but one of the things she was saying that with our technology, our phones becoming more and more prominent, ubiquitous actually with people, is schooling could well become learning how to communicate with humans without the technology.
Wow.
And she was talking about like talking circles and things like that in the schooling because we've taken for so long for granted that you're there for your curriculum. Like that you have friends there is almost like a side note. And as you're kind of referencing now, it's almost the more important thing to be healthy. Like it's kind of a weird way of being able to
Hmm.
understand how we are. And I don't know whether this is part of how organized education started with the Industrial Revolution and taking the rural kind of agricultural based community into organized education so you could work the factories. And that's still a state kind of like you go to school to get a job, so to speak. But
Hmm.
when you think of people who have the community that you gain and the friends that you gain through school, like that's what we remember. By and large, we don't remember the tests that we didn't do well on, or it's the people that we gain from. So you're heading, to me, you're hitting a subject area that is like, well, it's back to Gabor Mate, I know, in a way, right? Is how important that is to our own health. And we're not even, it's right there in front of us. And yet we're not like
Yeah.
gravitating to it to the same level. And the pandemic, to me, really demonstrated that in a very big way.
Yeah. Yeah. We all felt it, didn't we? We all felt ourselves sort of crumbling away, right? And this is the thing about, community and loneliness. I'm definitely not an expert on this subject matter, um, but kind of as a scientific and medical community, right? It's not just that we feel better when we're hanging out with some friends and
Yes.
sure, let's say the cliche of laughter is medicine, right? Is the best medicine. Um, there are, measurably there are measurable outcomes that demonstrate, the importance of community and the detrimental effects of
Oh,
loneliness long term, right? I just want to highlight that, it's not just feeling, better in the short term. This is like, loneliness and lack of community are linked to long term poor
oh
health
yeah.
outcomes, right? Even in kind of quote unquote more physical diseases. So I find myself in a family med setting pretty frequently just exploring those topics with people, especially young people.
Yes.
I think especially young people who live so much of their lives online and might be struggling with depression and anxiety.
Oh,
Within the constraints of the short appointments that we have as family docs, I really enjoy kind of probing that topic a little bit and trying to encourage people to build community, tap into the networks of support that they have, right? This is important stuff, and I think we need to wake up to the magnitude of this problem.
well, I think magnitude is the right word. When you're saying that, I'm thinking right away of when you see, because you see this online a lot, the shots of concerts, like shows, and how many people have their phone cameras up in the air,
Yeah, yeah,
not like you're actually there, like experiencing the show, and yet
yeah,
you're going through that little 2x2 screen on your phone as kind of like an experience. And to me, it's almost indicative of what you just said, right? It's like, how do you live that? And the hard part to know is it's not going away. Like it's just going to get better, right? It's just going to be like, are we going to, we're going to get to a point where we can't tell the difference more than likely.
mm,
And yet, and to me, it's just, how do you deal with, that's why I was so interested in this Dr. Sophie Redland, because of what school becoming our ability to connect with community, so to speak. And to your point, when you said about like even church, it's the community aspect to me of that has just, I'll say, overwhelmed what my thinking kind of was prior to that. And it's a
yeah,
very interesting kind of aspect that really does fit into the medical world now, right?
yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's vital. I have hope.
Oh,
I will say that as well. I have hope. I think kids and young people consistently surprise me with their desire to form community and to create laws and cultural norms that have that kind of put technology, in a better place. So I think I used to be um, pretty cynical about the future when it comes to tech and imagined us living in, an apocalyptic world where we're all cyborgs, But I have hope. I think young people don't want to be addicted to TikTok. You know what I mean?
no.
I think deep down they kind of crave meaningful connections and meaningful um, community.
Well, I mean, in many way, Lorenzo, you're evidence of that, right? Like you're dealing with another younger generation, but you're a younger generation to me. And it's like just the
Hmm.
fact that we're
Hmm.
seeing those things and seeing them in a different way is kind of exciting. Like I can remember when our son was like 2 years old. And that's when I knew technology was changing, because he could type his name in the computer before he could say it. So this is like the mid '90s, right?
Hmm.
But it's just one of the, you knew things were shifting when, oh my goodness, that's kind of crazy to me. So
Hmm.
as we move kind of forward on here, so this is one of the things, and I think it's really interesting because you've been, I didn't ask you this, but I should right now, but did you feel that you, and I won't say it was direct counseling, but with your father being in the field, he would have experienced a very different world than you are, from the point of view of having to deal with that 0 to 10 to 0 kind of world. Did you think you learned things in growing up in that environment that helped you to understand that too? And I don't mean necessarily they were intentional, from your father saying, sitting you down and saying you got to go and find ways to get respite, so to speak, or rest. Do you feel like being in that environment growing up, because he would have, he's seen a really dramatic shift in the world of medicine, I'm sure, and did like, and I'd say like not hereditarily, but like just things that you think would have made it help you to understand, wow, like I got to go and get rest here.
Hmm. Great question. I think that my dad, he's a very hardworking guy, and he kind of doesn't stop until the job is done.
Oh,
You
okay,
know,
okay,
he's kind of one of those, you do it right no matter how long it
yes,
takes kind of guys. Um, and I think that he probably modeled that to me. And yet he also did a great job of, in life, and as we've had conversation about medicine over the years, he's modeled this idea of um, kind of being able to sleep well at night if you've done your part, you know?
oh, okay,
So I
okay,
think I think he's done a good job of modeling to me, and some other colleagues as well, modeling to me the importance of kind of being able to rest in the fact that, hey, if you've done your part and you showed up, um, and you took care of what your responsibility was, you don't need to take home the stress with you, you know? Um, and I think that that goes a long way in preventing burnout,
yep,
and um, so that's something that I would definitely attribute to him, is just that idea of being faithful in the little moments,
interesting.
day by day, and then being able to go on with the rest of life, because that's something that I have struggled with, certainly in my training and as a new grad, like we've been talking about,
Yes.
um, you know, redefining what a success is, what a success story is, and so on. But I think, the longer I've been in this career now, the more I realize, if we do our part, we can take pride in that,
Hmm.
and find comfort in that. Um, I will be honest. I think my dad has had to learn rest along the way, perhaps at the same time that I have.
Oh,
We've
okay.
perhaps had more of a parallel journey of learning the importance of balance.
Yep.
And I think he would probably admit that too. That we've learned some of those lessons from each other, actually, which has been beautiful, and it's added a really amazing, unique dynamic to our relationship. Perhaps if I can go as far as to say, I hope that he has learned some things about balance and rest from me as well.
Well, that's cool. That's very well.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, Lorenzo. When I think what you just said, I can't believe what I've learned from my kids. Like I am actually just in many ways, almost like more so than what I learned from my parents, in an interesting way. Like I just the I was going to say, even doing this podcast, I kind of learned much from them, as far as what you can do and what you could go out and do, and I've been quite astounded by that. It's kind of
Mm.
a neat thing to have that happen.
Mm.
So with,
And
go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think you've alluded to something else, which we can come back to. But if I've heard you right, correct me if I'm wrong. I think you've alluded to the shifting landscape that we've seen. So
Yes.
tying it back to the technology and the challenges of mental health, just to sort of make that a little bit more explicit. Um, I do agree. I think the landscape of family medicine and mental health and all of that has changed. So, um, it's tied to technology. It's tied to all sorts of things, perhaps, but that is something that makes family medicine uniquely challenging these days. I don't know if we're going to head in that direction, but I wanted to
Yes.
just acknowledge that you were kind of alluding to the change over time of what is expected of doctors, of
Yes.
the types of presentations we're seeing, with a shift towards lots of mental health challenges and those people showing up in our offices, and just make that a little bit more explicit and kind of pull at that thread a little bit.
Yeah.
Um, I don't think you're wrong. I think you're right that that subjectively has definitely been our experience. So I just wanted to name that.
Interesting. Interesting. It's so this kind of starts to take us a little bit more to the other direction when we started at the beginning. And this is for me what you're in a world where you come into a world now where you hear lots about the medical community.
Hmm.
You've alluded to already people that don't have a family doctor, as an example. We talked about your dad actually doing house calls, as an example. Um, and now there almost seems to be more people than there are doctors, in a sense. So how have you um, dealt with that? Because you would have, I'll call it, the stories from your father of what he would do and who he would kind of serve and things like that with regards to
Hmm.
patients. And now you're kind of in a world where, like, how do I can't, if I go too far, I'm going to spread myself too thin because there's just so many desired people. Like how is that seen by this, like, the new doctor that kind of comes into this world? Because it's like you really had nothing to do with creating it, right? And yet you're faced with the outcome of what's there, and it's like how do you deal with that? Because I'm sure you do.
Yeah. Oh, such a timely question, right? And I think as a society, we're trying to figure this out right now. Um, I think it's a little bit overwhelming. It's a little bit overwhelming to graduate as a family doc and or any doc and enter this system that feels stretched. It really does feel stretched, and it doesn't just feel stretched for patients, right? And remember that even as docs, most of us have had patient experiences and been on the other side of things and been
Right,
frustrated,
right,
right?
right. Yeah.
But it's frustrating for care providers as well, right? When you sense that there's more need than you can deal with. I mean, so I guess the first place my mind goes to is um, it just feels overwhelming when there's a bigger need than you can deal with. Many of us docs are type A. We're perfectionists,
Yes,
right?
yes, yeah.
We're fixers, we're solvers, and immediately you enter a system that you can't fix, you can't solve. I remember being really frustrated when I graduated by certain things, right? I order an ultrasound and it's going to take months. Um, I have patients who ask me if I can take on their spouse, and I have to say, no, we're at capacity. I have multiple electronic medical records that I need to be comfortable using, right? Multiple interfaces, all of the systems and the electronic stuff, they don't talk to each other,
I can't even
right?
imagine this.
Challenge after challenge. So we feel it too, right? We feel it too. And there, as I say, there's sort of this existential or personality based frustration when you go into a career because you want to fix people and make make things right, make the world a better place, right?
Right, right.
And
Because that's
you
kind of
realize,
why you got into it in the first place,
yeah,
right?
right.
Not
And then you
kind
realize,
of. You
okay,
like,
totally, it's kind of the whole thing. And then you realize, gosh, it comes down to expectations again, perhaps, right? Maybe redefining, wow, wow, success versus failure, right? But that's where my mind goes right away. There's lots more to explore there, but I'll stop there for a second.
no, because it's one of the things that I am like being on the kind of from the outside on it. It's looking, and I kind of I can be kind of harsh because I think our leaders today are unable to solve the problem. Um, I think they're incapable of solving the problem because of that is not what they've been elected to do, so to speak, in many ways. But I have hope here. Like I have enormous hope, especially in talking to you and having a conversation here on this podcast. But I've also got, in many ways, there's this technology part that's coming, right? That we hear a lot
Hmm.
about, and this artificial intelligence. Recently, had someone on that was talking about that. There's things kind of in hitting our top three: the healthcare, food, and housing, right? And that here we have this. Um, I'll call it technology manifesting itself, and like we're calling it artificial intelligence, but it's affecting all kind of walks of life. And in a medical situation or a medical world, what do we see that will come out of this? Because I mean, popular a lot that I hear is this whole. I mean, it's always in little sound bites, right? That we get excited, and nothing is as simple as a sound bite, but it's like AI is going to become sentient, as an example, right? And I really struggle with this because I mean we can't create a hydrogen atom. We can't create an atom. We can't create a cell. Um, and yet here we're going to say AI is suddenly going to become sentient. So it'll have all our senses. It'll be able to reason. It's like, how do we jump from there to there? But at the same time, I think if we're going to have this ability to like Google has kind of brought us here already, right? We can ask Google today. Like 30 years ago, you couldn't do this. You can ask Google anything today, and you'll get an answer, a physical answer. It's not going to tell you how you feel, but it'll be a physical answer. And as those answers become more prominent, that will give us like that physicality, so to speak, that science kind of answer to questions that we have. But when you talk about this sentient idea, um, I think the fear to me is more that we believe that it's sentient than that it is.
Hmm.
Because I think that is a grave concern to me because that becomes like if you believe that that's has that ability, then that's a really scary world to me.
Hmm.
But stepping back to those other questions, so that's where I was kind of saying, like, do you see things that um, give you hope that that things will improve in the medical world with all of those kind of I've kind of stretched quite a range of things I've talked about here,
No,
but
no, I'm
it's like
tracking. Sure. Yeah.
to me there's so much that's there, and I'm so like I said many times I love to hear the Gabor and emotion and seeing like we're more emotional and spiritual beings than we are physical beings in many ways,
Hmm.
right? And having that and realizing that, what will that change for us in the future? I've given you a whole bunch of stuff there, Lorenzo,
Oh man, it's great.
but it fascinates me because I think this is a time like no other in many ways, and yet, in many ways, I don't think we're utilizing it even like how the ancients would have necessarily used it, right? Like we like to think of ourselves because of technology we're the smartest generation ever, but yet I see constant pictures of kind of being the stupidest generation ever.
Yeah,
So your
sure.
thoughts, like how I know that's a
Yeah.
lot, but I mean that's what I was
No,
trying
it's
to.
fascinating. Yeah, there's so many themes there, right? I mean, because you're right, we can't villainize technology. I mean, earlier we're talking about the negative effects of let's just stick on that social
Yes.
media.
Yep. Yep.
Let's say the negative effects of social media, they seem to be correlated with, anxiety and depression in young people. Okay, sure. That may be the case, but we can't throw away technology. You're right. Technology has got us to where we are.
No.
Technology is a shoe. It's it's building supplies. Technology is this pen.
Yep.
Technology has made my life as a doctor
Oh.
in some ways infinitely different than a doctor 100 years ago, right? I can hop on this resource we call Up to Date and find, as the name implies, up to date, relevant information
Unbelievable.
in a second,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Which, by the way, as a bit of an aside, has become so much a part of a family doctor's job, is being able to access information quickly and know how to find reliable information in a timely manner.
Reliable. That's
Reliable, and that's the
important.
key,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Now, so I certainly am with you, Doug. We can't villainize technology. It's vital. And there's already AI being used in technology, right? That's
Yes.
used in
Yep.
healthcare in ways that we just weren't aware of. Um, so, take the latest example now. A lot of docs are trying to use an AI scribe, right? So you'll have a microphone in the room and it's listening to your conversation and it charts for you.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so there's lots of ways we could take this, but just to jump off of
Yeah.
that for a
Yeah.
second, I mean, charting is one of the biggest challenges for doctors, right? There's immense amounts of charting and documentation that needs to take place, and historically, right? Maybe you speak it into a little
Oh yeah.
recorder, and then it gets typed out. Even when I was going through residency, you'd pick up the phone and you could dictate a note and somebody on the other side would listen to that recording and type out your note. Now a lot of that's happening with
Yep.
microphones in the last couple of years, but that could be a game changer. I have colleagues that are trying some of those various AI scribes. It's a little bit, sometimes it creates notes that are too long. That's one of the challenges right now.
The only thing is with that is it's only going to get better though.
It's only going to get better. Yeah.
Like this is
So
the
I
part
mean,
that's hard to understand, but it's not going to
yeah,
get worse.
yeah, yeah. And I'll use that as a bit of a launch pad too to say something else. I would love to be able to sit there, have a little, microphone on my desk and an AI scribe charting for me as we go, review it afterwards. Why? Well, it makes my job a little bit easier,
Yeah.
but it does something else that's perhaps even more important, right? And this is an interesting topic because we talk about technology getting in the way,
Yes.
but let's not forget that technology can, when used appropriately, facilitate better face to face. I mean, look at us on this podcast right now, right?
Unbelievable. Unbelievable.
Unbelievable.
Yep.
But specifically sticking with that example, right? If you have a little microphone here and it's recording your charting, I can turn my chair, right? I can look away from my computer and I can be present with the patient in front of me in a whole new way.
Oh, that's
Because
cool.
right now I've got a computer screen and a type, keyboard, and I have to look and juggle, right? And I'm juggling, and they sense that, right? They
Oh,
sense that
for
your
sure we do.
attention is broken,
Yep.
right? So I'm excited, right? I'm excited by that sort of thing. There's a doc at my clinic trying it out right now, and there's lots of docs kind of exploring this, projects going on, and so on. I mean, just to keep going down the rabbit trails,
Yeah.
right? Um, uh, you know, some people talk about physicians becoming obsolete and healthcare really changing with technology, right? So you can walk right in, the machine kind of does a full body MRI, it says this is what's going on, or the machine reads the X-ray instead of the radiologist, and it's like, have a nice day. But just as I've talked about the importance of being present,
Yep.
and we've talked about the importance of seeing the human in front of you, empathy, community, all of this stuff. I think there's something powerful about presence as healing,
Yeah. No.
and presence as sometimes the best thing I can offer, which I know I've alluded to earlier in our conversation here. but there's data that supports that, right? That if you, for example, sit instead of stand,
Yes.
if you appropriately touch a patient with a stethoscope, say, listening to their lungs, the humanity is so vital when it comes to healing, and people feel subjectively more seen, more heard, and so on. So I'm not too worried about job security for us.
No, to me, it's
Not in
like,
the near future.
I mean, it's funny. Gabor Mate's come up a couple of times here, but I think he's ahead of his time in many
Yeah,
ways, because I think it's going to be we're going to be dealing with us emotional beings rather than us physical
sure,
beings as we go
sure.
through it. Because the physical part, as you mentioned, technology will deal with that.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
because you won't have to do as much because we have the tools in order to do that. But that humanity part, and that's where I come back to the sentience of AI. I don't think it can do that. And I don't think it will
Yeah.
ever do that. I mean, I just come back to the simple things, right? I mean, if somewhere along the line we created like the hydrogen atom, okay. But we haven't. We can't create water. Like, it's crazy. We cannot live very many days without water, as you know. And it's like we can't create it.
And I
We
think we're going to be off put, like if we get really close to human, creating like a human like robot, let's say, but it's not quite there. Isn't that almost freakier,
oh
right? Like almost human and not quite there.
I just think from a science and math world, I think we have enormous difficulties with infinity. I don't think we understand that, and it's like you keep going down. Like I mean, what we for years we had the electrons, the neutrons, and what made up an atom, and then there's quarks and leptons there, right? And now we're down into even further depth. Well, until we find something else, right? And to me, that is infinite, and we have like contained in our bodies infinity. Now,
Hmm.
how do you and that's where, to me, the emotional, we haven't even touched on, like, the why we're conscious or conscient. We haven't talked about the unconscious part of it, right? And like
Hmm.
the third of our lives that we live, and wherever that is we go. So it's, to me, it's like it's really cool hearing you articulate some of those technologies that are going to enable you to, as the doctor, to be more connected humanly, emotionally with me as the patient. I
Yeah.
think that's
Can I,
gigantic.
can I push this another step here? I see my mind is going to two places. I'll start with one place, which is just to say we do have to be cautious as we move forward, right? You hear about all sorts of um, strange technologies that at the surface could um, help healthcare, could help well-being, but I think we have to be cautious. I mean, you think about the role of VR, for example. I've
Right, right.
I've read about that being used at end of life, to provide some comfort, which at the surface kind of seems nice. Maybe somebody can have a VR experience and go somewhere else mentally. But it comes back to this idea of humanity and presence, right?
Hmm.
Should we rather not run the opposite direction and say if somebody feels, alone or is suffering existentially at the end of at the end of life, why not stand by their side, right? Hold their
Right,
hand,
right,
be
right.
present.
Yeah.
So I get excited by it. I understand the caution. I
Yes.
hope it's clear. I'm also speaking totally on my own opinion and not representing anyone here.
No.
But something else that I think you've touched on, if I
Yes.
can dive
Yeah.
real quick, which I think is interesting, and I don't know if this is where your mind was going. If we get to the point where the technology can make the diagnoses,
Yes.
right, and can propose a plan of treatment and so on, right, the the role of the physician becomes guide and consultant and interpreter, right,
Hmm.
and friend. And there's something interesting there because I think we're experiencing a little bit of that already. And that's one of the things that I don't see talked about as far as a challenge of family medicine goes, right? The classic challenges of family medicine, which I'm happy to talk about, but paperwork and charting and complexity of patients and population growth, doctors being siloed in subspecialty, even a family doc who practices, say, hospitalist medicine or addictions and doesn't have their own panel, right? There's so many sort of things that have led us to where we're at. But another challenge of family medicine that I want to highlight is that we're trained to deal with the sort of physical things, the blood pressure issues, the cholesterol issues, right? We're trained to deal with cancer diagnoses and screening, and we are trained to deal with mental health things. But as there's been a shift towards more mental health presentations, we have had to become that healer in another way, or at least that's been the expectation of the patient. I don't think our training has kept up with it.
Yes.
I don't know. I hope that makes sense. So in other words, we might get there in the future where the family doc has to almost be more of a counselor in some ways, right? And it already feels like that is required of me. And it's a really tricky challenge. And I guess, not only is it because of the perhaps shift towards mental health presentations, I'll also say the expectations of patients has shifted, right? Patients are more aware of their own mental health, and patients are trying to optimize their own health, right? They listen to medical podcasts, they go to therapy, they do this, they do that. And now there's an expectation that I can be present and their therapist and their counselor and so on. So I don't see that talked about a lot, but I think it's something that subjectively we all feel as doctors, right? There's this expectation that I'm not just dealing with your blood pressure and your low sodium and your cholesterol, but that I'm also your therapist. So there's something there that I think we need to get better at, even at the level of training physicians.
You hit on something that I even experienced as an engineer, is because when someone hears that, because many don't even know really what an engineer does. It's like that thing that they build buildings or they build airplanes, whatever. And in a family setting, social setting, it's, oh, you're an engineer, so you must know how this works. It's the same kind of, like, you study mechanical engineer and they're pointing out a transformer and there's, can you tell me how the transformer works, right? And well, I don't really know. Like, that's not part of I could figure it out, but I don't know. So your experience there, I completely do get. And one of the things that came up, like I said, on this other podcast that we had in talking with Dr. Redland, was she was finding that quickly, because she was a family physician as well, but she was saying that the aching elbow, that was the first minute. And then the rest of the 14 minutes where they wanted to talk to her about numerous things. It was, you mentioned the word counselor. It was like, and she was really starting to explore that, because it was like, it seemed that's what was more needed than the solution to my elbow that's aching, as an example. And so that hits on exactly what you're kind of talking about, because it's like, I often was saying, like, I kind of say, like, if you're feeling you got a sore throat, to me the worst thing to do is go and Google it, because you'll be horrified by the time you finish what your self-diagnosis is. So to me, I think that's going to continue to be a very important role for us. We're always going to need the doctors, but how that shifts, I think the education period curriculum is going to shift enormously because of what we're going to need, right? So, I mean, doctors are always going to be a very important part of it. One of the things I will say that I'm so impressed with is that we haven't let down our credentialing a doctor. That seems to be something that's staying, like, oh, now I can get my degree in six years. Like, it's still that 11, 12, multiple years that, and to me, to do that, you have to really want to be a doctor. because
Yeah.
that's tremendous. So how do
They just
you?
love the suffering, right?
Oh, it's staggering, but it probably teaches a lot about life, right? And how that kind
Yeah.
of goes on. So it'll be interesting to see how the technology, like anything else, we're going to have to be wary of certain parts of it. Um,
Hmm.
but I do think that maybe it will give us more time to deal with us as emotional beings.
Hmm.
Because
Hmm.
to me,
Well said.
I've had many arguments with it with science engineer people because I think we make all our decisions emotionally. Like, so, no.
Me too.
I sit down and I figure it out. I didn't say anything about not doing the required work to make your decision. But when somebody makes a decision on buying a house or a car, or they decided, like, do you think we're ready to build the bridge? Do you think,
Kind of
how do you
justify our decision.
feel? How do you feel about that? I feel great. We did all the calculations we needed to. Well, that's emotions, right? That's
Hmm.
we did the right thing to kind of get there. And I think it's thrilling, but at the same time, I don't want to use the word suspect, but it's to be wary, so to speak, right? Like as far as like you hear about the stuff Neuralink's doing, right?
Sure. Yeah.
And it's like it's wonderful that being able to give that cable, but we are in such an early stage of
Yeah.
time, right? And
Yeah.
like I said, I think as humans we have a really hard time with infinity. Like I don't think I think it's almost probably impossible to grasp.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I've given this a little bit of thought, kind of coincidentally. I don't know if you know Andy Steiger
Yes.
from Apologetics Canada. So I've had lots of conversations with him. He's a friend of mine, and something that came up after a conversation with him, which has been helpful for me in many areas of life, but even as I think through the technological changes that are coming and are
Yes.
coming rapidly,
Yep.
perhaps a bit of a filter or a framework that we can apply to say, is this good or bad? Or you know, um, does it contribute to community? Does it bring us
Uh-huh.
closer together? Does it, um, help us love each other better?
Yep.
Right. And if yes, great. You're on the team.
Yep.
We'll take that. And if not, let's think really hard about this. So
Yes.
I'm with you. I think the uncertainty of it all and the infinite potential of AI and technological changes is overwhelming for people. But as a society, I mean, Andy would talk about this. As in our current generation, even right, we've encountered unbelievable
Oh,
technological changes
yes.
already,
Yep.
and I think we just need to approach things with that framework. Does it contribute to healthy community or not? You know?
That is a very cool statement. I think that's actually maybe a good place to kind of wrap things up because I was going to say, Lorenzo, you have given me, and it's great, but hope. Like it's just like I've said this a few other times to kind of younger guests. It's like the world's in good hands, man. In times to come, like I just in what you're kind of embracing and dealing with in your work and how you're thinking, what you've explained throughout our conversation here to me is we're in good hands. Like that's all I can say is we're in good hands. So I
Appreciate
we're gonna
that, Doug.
have you on again
Awesome.
because we touched on a few things, but there's still a ton of stuff that I think is very fascinating, and you have a great ability to articulate those ideas too. So, Dr.
Awesome.
Lorenzo Smith, very enjoyed having you as a guest here on Better Than Not, and I hope you'll join us again. Before I go here, Lorenzo, um, I said this, but is there anything else you'd like to kind of wrap up with?
Huh. Good question. Um, I think I'll just, hammer home maybe something I've said about um, the importance of seeing the humanity in others. You know,
Yes.
it, I think that if people were to leave with one thing that they can do to improve their own well-being, you know, it would be to surround themselves with people that see them and know them. You know, to have
Yes.
people in your life that see you and know you is a beautiful thing. To see the humanity of others,
Yeah.
right? To build that empathy in yourself so that, um, you know, if you see somebody from a different path of life or a different walk walking down the street towards you, don't cross the road, right? See the humanity in others. And even when you're at your doctor's office, right?
Yes.
See the humanity of the physician in front of you, um, who's kind of hopefully doing the best, um, that they can within the constraints of the complexity of the medical things they're dealing with, and a system that's stretched thin. That's what I would leave people with. But Doug, it's been
Well
a
said.
real treat to chat with you.
Well said. So with that, I think we'll wrap up this episode of Better Than Not. Thanks again, Lorenzo, for joining us. I do hope you come back again. With that,
Looking
if you
forward
could
to it.
stay on for a minute, we'll have it wrapped up. Thank you.